G'day, I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and in this video I'm going to show you how long it takes for hardwood wood chips to become compost in a tumbler composter, and also what else you need to add and do to successfully break wood chips down into this amazing gardening resource. Let's get into it. Now, wood chips in the garden saves water, attracts worms, encourages microbial and fungal activity, and is great for weed suppression. And that's all good, but when it's used fresh as a mulch, your plants don't gain any good nutritional value immediately at all. For your plants to get the most nutrition out of wood chip, it really needs to break down first, so the plants can get access to that goodness. And this can take ages if it's placed directly onto the garden bed as a mulch. So I decided to run this experiment to see how long it would take for hardwood wood chip to break down in a tumbler composter and turn into a forest floor-like humus that our plants adore. Using a tumbler composter like this is one of the most convenient ways to make compost, because instead of turning a pile by hand with a fork or a shovel, you just spin the barrel to mix it up and oxygenate the materials inside. A bit like one of those guys at the local sports club, you know, spinning for the raffle prize. Number 14, you're the winner of the meat tray. But seriously, being high up like this as well is also easier on the back, plus it's easier to empty out once the compost is done. In this example, I had a combination of some shredded paper from our office and wood chip as carbon, and for nitrogen and moisture, I had some old fruit and kitchen scraps. Whether or not a tumbler composter makes compost faster than other methods is something I haven't tested yet, so I really don't know. But to be honest, it would be an injustice and a short video if I simply focused on time and not the process I went through to turn this into this. Because whilst time is a factor, you'd be waiting more than donkey's years if you didn't pay attention to technique to at least try and speed up the process of turning wood chip into compost. And the first thing about technique I want to mention is you just can't compost wood chip with just wood chip. Well, you can, but you need really big piles so that you generate enough heat for it to compost down, and then you need big machinery to keep turning those piles over. Otherwise, it will take forever. In a backyard or smaller operation, it's best to mix things high in carbon, such as wood chips, with other organic matter that's high in nitrogen and moisture, like grass and kitchen scraps. That way, the nitrogen and moisture in these other materials will help to break down the stubborn carbon compounds in the wood chips. I don't like giving out ratios of you should use this much carbon materials to this much nitrogen stuff, because I think it just overly complicates the art of composting, and I just think it's stupidly easy, so we should treat it like that and explain it like that. Basically, if you find your composting materials are too dry and are taking a long time to break down, then add some nitrogen. Or if your composting materials are excessively rotten and stinky for more than a few days, add some carbon. Normally you would usually place more carbon than nitrogen in a mix to begin with, but I've seen and created many exceptions and examples that broke the composting rules over the years and still turned out super good compost. Once the tumbler is full, it's just a matter of giving it a few turns whenever you get the chance. Daily is great, but if you go several days or even weeks without turning, it's not the end of the world, but the idea is to turn it regularly for better and faster decomposition. After 6 weeks, the composting process was going pretty slow. Still quite moist. Smells good. Needs a lot more work yet though. After 24 weeks or 6 months, almost everything had broken down except for the wood chips. I was able to find several large pieces of wood, with some feeling hard and difficult to break, showing me that this batch still had a really long way to go. The lack of other materials and moisture meant that the mix had consumed most of the nitrogen, and if I didn't intervene and add some more nitrogen-rich stuff, it would take forever to compost down. So I decided to do a little bit of garden maintenance in the form of a push mower with a catcher, so I could collect several catcher loads of grass clippings to add it to the compost tumbler. I was actually surprised at how much grass I could stuff in, but I mowed and I stuffed and I mowed and I stuffed as much grass under the hood of this tumbler as I could, and then I mowed some more and kept stuffing until it was chocker up the blocker and I couldn't fit any more grass in it. A month later, at 7 months all up, and the mix was looking better. There were still signs of grass, but it had mixed in and broken down considerably. I was noticing more decay in the wood chips, and overall the mix had a good moisture content. After 12 months, yes, 1 whole year, the mix had shrunk in size, but there were still a few small clumps of grass clippings. I could see that the wood chips had finally broken down to a decent level. However, I wasn't satisfied enough. There was still plenty of moisture, so I decided to leave it for a bit longer. Well, a lot longer. Here we are today at the 18-month mark, yes, a year and a half, and this is the result. This wonderful, beautiful, cool mix of forest floor, humus, compost broken down, but it's not broken down fully. There are still several hard pieces in here, like sticks, that still quite difficult to break, and it's still showing that red hardwood. I reckon if I just left it in there, you would probably get petrified wood before it broke down into compost. Let's get this completed compost out and we'll sift it and see what's left, how much good compost we've got, and how much wood chip is left. I'll tell you what, there's a lot in here. You would only use like sparingly. You only need to use it sparingly around the garden. You don't have to use the whole lot around one plant. That's just an overkill. You want to spread this goodness as lightly as possible because that's all you need to give your plants a great feed. You can still see some eggshell that hasn't broken down yet. Again, that's not a big issue. That'll be great in the garden. Calcium for the plants. I can't believe how much there is. And it's really dense. Like, it's hard to show you how dense this is. I guess if you do the crush test, it's almost mud-like, you know, but it's not a clay, but it is so dense and rich and full of moisture that it's a really good result. See that there's no rust or anything like that. The sides of the composter hasn't been eaten away, even though there's been a lot of acidic stuff in here. Citrus fruit, all those types of things. Yeah, it's a good composter. Really is a good piece of kit. I rate it highly. Oh, Yeah, I reckon there'd be about 30 or 40 kilo of compost there. Easy. All right, so let's sift it. Oh, look at this big piece. Massive. Difficult to break. Still, yeah, gonna be turned into petrified wood for sure. There you go. Look at that. Isn't it gorgeous? I'll probably use this in around potted plants or in with my potting mix. Oh, just absolutely magnificent stuff, amazing. And only a gardener can get excited about this type of compost, and made from hard chipwood as well. Yeah. So let's finish up with some important points and observations about this wood chip composting experiment. Firstly, there was no direct water added to the mix at any time, only moisture from the organic matter put into the tumbler. Adding water to a dry compost pile won't help much to reactivate the microbes and decomposition. Adding nitrogen-rich materials like grass clippings will increase moisture and release natural chemicals and microbial activity that will in turn help to break down the carbon. What materials you use matters. For example, using a hardwood wood chip will always be harder to break down than a softwood wood chip would be. How hot or cold the ambient temperature is will speed up or slow down the composting process. Where your tumbler is positioned in full sun or shade will make a difference due to the operating temperature. This tumbler is shaded out for most of the day by the edge of our orchard here, so that would make the composting process take longer. There is an argument that compost made slower under lower temps is better than hot and fast, because you get a compost with more and better microbes and fungi, which can better help your plants absorb nutrients. I've composted in the sun and in the shade over the past couple of decades here, and I can tell you I've never really noticed any stark difference between compost in the hot sun directly or composting in the shade. But you know, perhaps one day I'll get two of these or the same composting method, and we'll put one in the sun and one in the shade with exactly the same ingredients, and we'll see which one takes longer and which one turns out the best in the end. I think that's the only way you could really test it. That might be a good experiment for the future. Lastly, how fine the wood chips or materials are in the beginning makes a big difference. Wood shavings or sawdust will naturally compost down faster and easier than larger wood chip pieces, because the smaller the pieces, the bigger surface area there is for the composting process to work. This experiment was deliberately done using a chunky standardized wood chip that you'd get from a big chipper. You know, if you wanted in the beginning, I could have run this through a smaller machine or a smaller shredder and cut it up into finer pieces, and that way it would have composted down a lot faster, but that wasn't the experiment. At the end of the day, of course, if you want to make a really fast compost in one of these things, you can do so. You don't have to use wood chip, you can use just anything from the garden, a mix of shredded paper and grass, and you're going to probably get compost in about a couple of weeks even, maybe a month at the most. I also just wanted to mention, and it's not sponsored, but the Easy Composter, easycomposter.com.au. They're the only composting machine or tumbler made in Australia these days. It's made here on the Sunshine Coast, so it's not far away. I've met the owners They used to run a hot water system business, but then that gave way to making these composters. They're really good design. They're an excellent piece of kit. They're going to last a good 20 years, I reckon. So there's no affiliate. I can't give you a better deal or anything like that. I just recommend them. If you want to know more about some of the products I used in this video, I'll put links in the description below, so check that out. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you'll tumble that thumb upwards and then give it a big thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and share the video around. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. Cheers.